Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. I'm your host, Viz, and we have Alison Leiby, who is somewhere on that screen. Let's
I
see.
promise I'm here.
She is there, and we'll bring her up here. And Halle Kiefer from the podcast Ruined. How are you guys doing?
Hot.
Hot. Oh,
Real
God.
hot.
Tell me
What
about it.
about you?
Same here. I'm located just outside of Washington, D.C., and it was like in the
Oh,
mid 90s today. Allison, are you with us?
I am. I don't know why my video isn't working.
There you go.
there you
There
go.
you go. We got you. We got you. So I've been listening to your guys' podcast, and I gotta admit, just the idea behind it is kind of ingenious. Now, let me get this straight. Halle, you're the chicken.
hmm
No.
No. I'm the horror fan. Allison is the huge chicken. Yeah,
Allison's
she's
the
so afraid she can't even show up on film.
I know.
That's how
She's so
terrified she
free she
is.
keeps disappearing off the screen.
Like present.
All right,
I
all right.
don't know.
So,
My video must be internet.
so Halle,
Mhm.
you are the big horror fan.
Yes. And this all started because Allison, as my one friend who doesn't like horror at all, I knew I could just immediately tell her about a horror movie. I'd be like, "Oh, you won't believe it happened," because she was never going to see it.
Right.
Other people might be like, "I might see it. I don't want to know." She was the perfect person to unload all this spooky stuff onto because, as someone who was too afraid to watch it, she still wanted to know what happened and be a little bit afraid. So
Yeah. I think I love the idea of twists in horror and surprises and stuff like that. I just don't want to experience them ever, but I do want to know what they are after the fact from somebody. So it kind of perfectly.
So, Allison, let me ask you this: have you actually ever watched a bona fide horror film, or if you have, when was the last time it happened?
Um, I saw Get Out. I'm a
Okay.
hero. I did that. No, I saw Get Out and I thought it was great, but I also had nightmares for days after the fact. Um, and then there's a handful I've seen The Shining. I've seen um, one or two other. I saw somebody in college made me watch Saw, so I've unfortunately
Oh,
seen Saw. And then the one that always comes up and people are like, that's a horror movie and but I love Silence of the Lambs. I think it's a great
oh yeah,
film,
yeah.
but I think it's a thriller. It's not a horror movie.
yeah,
It's a
I think
psychological
so.
thriller,
Yeah.
absolutely. And let me tell you
Yeah.
guys, I'm married
Mhm.
to the biggest chicken out there, and my wife. I mean,
That's tough for the
yeah,
relationship.
Yeah.
we have, we're married for 21 years, and when I hear her coming down the stairs, I already know I got to stop what I'm watching. You know?
Talking about me again.
I got to stop what we're watching because, yeah, it's going to upset her. That's just 21 years worth of experience in marriage right
hmm
there. So, Allison, tell me, who was it that actually came up with the idea? Was it Halle? Was it you? Was it Allison for the podcast Ruined?
I think it was kind of it just kind of evolved. We always talk about how this kind of started because Hallie and I spend all day on GChat talking. And we were basically doing the written version of this. She was telling me, she was spoiling horror movies for me, the same way we do on the podcast, but in between sending emails, in text. And
Okay.
so I don't know exactly who of us said it should be a podcast, but we kind of landed on that together and we're both yeah, we absolutely, we've been friends for years and always want to work together on something. And then this seemed like the perfect thing to do together.
So, how long has the podcast been going now?
We launched at the end of August of last year, so we're in August. We'll come up on a year.
Yeah.
But we had actually recorded. It's we were trying to record on our own, as you can imagine from our technological issues. Those episodes are perhaps not of the quality we would have liked them at the time.
Yes.
But yeah, so probably we launched in August, but we had recorded episodes the December previous to that
Uh-huh.
on our own, and then we sort of hooked up with this production company, Irony Point, who they have a podcast branch, and they were willing to produce it for us, which is really nice. But yeah, this has been since the beginning of our friendship, and what the world of course needs another podcast. We thought there's not enough podcasts out there. We got to turn this into a podcast.
Yeah, we need to.
Exactly. And it's a great idea. I just love the whole idea behind it. And you guys take questions and you answer the viewers' questions, the listeners' questions. Now, as far as you go, Haley, I mean, have you been a lifelong horror fan?
Yeah, I definitely feel like even I remember being in kindergarten and I was really into like any spooky kids book. And I remember reading, do you remember this story? It was like the girl with the green ribbon. And it was like a girl and she could never take a ribbon off. And then, at the end, a spoiler alert, if you haven't read this children's story, her head falls off.
Oh.
And I remember reading that and being so terrified in kindergarten that I hid the book it was a library book, in my parents' home. And they could never find it, so they ended up having to pay for it. But I feel like that from like a young age, I feel like a lot of kids are like that. Like spooky things, creepy things were so, I think because it was so out of the ordinary. Like it was like a world I couldn't even imagine. It was so captivating. And then of course, R.L. Stein, Stephen King, I'm a woman of the 90s, So I feel like, I've always liked them. And then I feel like in my relationship, with Dave, boyfriend of the pod, who I constantly reference. He does not like horror movies either, except I realize he will watch like Giallos or like a 70s, like more of an art house horror movie.
Uh-huh.
So he would never watch a Saw, but he likes those kinds of movies. So it's sort of like, oh, it's nice that like, even though I'm with someone who doesn't care for horror, I could still, I found a loophole that I can still watch. But I feel like from childhood, I don't know, it's so thrilling. It's like the genre I like above all else,
Oh, absolutely. I'm definitely with you there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Allison, you are a professional writer and you have actually written for the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Now, here's a little reverse thing. I have not been able to convert my wife to a horror fan, but she loves this show. And I just walked in and we just started watching it and it just grabs you. So how did you get involved with that show, which is on Amazon Prime? It's a Amazon exclusive, right? It's an original.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an Amazon original. And we're both writers. That's how like we know each other. But I had written for some other shows, in my career, and I had met the people that run this show years back, and then there just happened to be, an opening when I was not working on something else, so it just kind of like the stars aligned. But it's a very like perfect place for me. I'm like a Jewish woman, Upper West Side, walked away from like a regular life to like pursue comedy. So like, personally, I'm like, I understand the story. I can write it.
I totally get it. I'm a Greek guy from Queens.
Yeah, there you go.
I totally get it. So what's it like being in that writer's? First of all, on a big show like that, I've always wanted to ask this. How many writers are, we hear about the writer's room and stuff that comes out of the writer's room. Is that just a saying, or you guys just really crammed into a room bouncing ideas off each other?
No, writers' rooms are like real places where we do work. I also have an office, but we do get in the writers' room, and that's the creators, Amy and Dan, and then in addition to them, there's, depending on the season, 5 or 6 of us, other writers. So it's small. It's a very small group for how big a show it feels.
Now, you're also a comedian. Where would you say your passion lies right now? Is it comedy? Is it writing? What would you say is your heart's passion?
I mean, they all kind of are part of a comedy career. I still think the podcast is the most fun I have because it's just me and Halle goofing off for an hour, and I get to find out about a horror movie that I will never see. But they all kind of influence each other, and I'm not working on anything right now, so stand-up is kind of my main focus. But that just changes over the course of the year.
Okay.
Kind of whatever you're influenced by.
Totally get it. And I'll tell you what, I have interviewed a lot of people, a lot of actors and horror movies. You would be surprised how many of them are scared of horror movies. Now,
it's something I always want to know, always would want to know is is everybody who's in a horror movie a horror fan?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
cashing a paycheck.
Yeah. No, they're not. And I would say the majority are not horror fans. For some of them, they went into doing their first horror movie and completely terrified. But of course, once you're there and you see how it's done and the special effects, for some of them, the fear goes away. For some of them, it doesn't. But doing this now for 15 months, having interviewed well over 70 guests, I am really surprised as to these actors that have starred in some of the scariest movies you can imagine are absolutely terrified of horror movies. That's
so funny.
Yeah, it's really surprising. So
Well, that reminds me a little bit of what Halle, you can explain when people are like, I'm too, like, even, or me, you've told it to me as well, like, I'm too scared, like, I can't watch this, like, how to kind of, like, remind yourself. You phrase it so well about, like...
I do this all the time. I remember I did this during Hereditary, but, like, just thinking about, like, how many people auditioned for the roles, like, how many people really would have killed to be there, and then how just off camera there's, like, a table with snacks and, like, fruit in bowls, like, once you sort of pull yourself out of the reality of it, which, of course, is, like, what makes horror thrilling, is, like, films that can create a whole universe. But once you sort of step back, it's like there's somebody who's like exhausted. There's somebody who's like trying to learn their lines. You know, all the sort of the mundane stuff of like, oh God, we got to stop and like reset the lights or whatever. Then I feel like it's easier to get through those like horrifying moments of like, these are all trained professionals. That is not fake blood, you know?
Right.
Exactly. So Halle, inside the horror genre, what would you say is your favorite subgenre in horror?
You know, I go back and forth a lot. I think I'm more of a sci-fi horror fan. The Thing is probably my favorite horror movie. I like sci-fi because I sort of feel like I'm more able to imagine it happening. You know, you're stuck in space, you're stuck underwater, you're stuck in Antarctica. It's like those things do happen. Like that's already a terrifying idea for me to think about. You know, versus like a house. It's like, well, I have a house. You know, I've been to houses. But yeah, something about sci-fi and sort of it does feel like the lesson of you know, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Yeah. Even though every sci-fi horror movie has that moral, we can't learn it in real life. You know, like I feel like people are like, well, what if I could? You know, whatever, send Jeff Bezos to the moon. It's like, I guess, but is that going to pan out? I don't know, you know? So, yeah, I love across the board, I love horror movies, but sci-fi, I think because there's like a slightly more of a grain of truth to me about it, makes it scarier, for sure.
So I would assume you are like a big X-Files fan, right?
Oh, yes, of course, yes. Again, as a child of the 90s.
I love the X-Files.
Now you see that didn't scare you, Alison?
I do think as a child I was less sensitive to horror than I am as an adult. I think the older I get, like the more sensitive I am to like any concepts of horror. But like as a kid, I loved the X-Files and like the Scary Stories books. I absolutely read those. And R.L. Stine. I did like that stuff as a kid, but like horror movies as an adult, I like can't do.
And I also feel like X-Files kind of reminds you what you said about the Silence of the Lambs. Like it was a procedural.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have two characters, you know they're not going to die. You're watching them investigate something, but you're still like, okay, there's no way they're not going to both get out of this. So you can sort of enjoy the thrill without being like, are they going to both be murdered? So it's a safer way to enjoy a scare, sort of.
Exactly. And there have been some really scary X-Files episodes. And one that comes to mind involves one that is very similar to The Thing. Both Scully and Mulder go to Antarctica. And they discover that creature that crawls up, you know, inside the back of people's necks. I mean, there were some terrifying X-File episodes. And for me, the subgenre that I can honestly say scares me is the paranormal subgenre. Ghosts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason...
Now, are you someone... Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, go on.
I would say, are you someone who believes in ghosts?
Yes.
Like, you know, believes in phenomenon?
That's why.
Oh, that makes sense. Then.
That's why it scares me. It scares me because I believe in it. It's something I never want to experience in real life.
Right.
I'm not the kind of person that needs to go out and seek proof to believe in it. I'll leave that up to the people who just have this overwhelming curiosity to capture a disembodied voice on a tape recorder. That's not me. That's not me. Definitely not into that. Now, I heard your latest podcast, and you guys were talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So,
A fun one.
do you, Haley, like to go back to like the classics with Allison?
Definitely. Yes, I feel like Allison, I'll let you give your opinion, but yeah, the classics are classic for a reason. You know, I mean, like Freddy. I think what's fun about Freddy is he's in certain films just so over the top that it's less scary but more fun. I made a bold statement, and it's true that I do like A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 better than the first Nightmare on Elm Street, which I understand is very upsetting to people. I just did. I don't know why. I think the idea of like Freddy invading you or making you kill is scarier to me. Like the idea of an entity like controlling you. But I mean, Allison, what would you say is your favorite of the classic horrors we've done? I'm trying to think of the other ones.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else we've done.
Well, The Exorcist, of course.
The Exorcist, I think, is really far up there. I do think also, like, what I like when we do the classics is, like, these are hugely important movies, both in the horror genre, but also in pop culture. And, like, The Simpsons is, like, one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's, like, Treehouse of Horror episodes are always referencing, and, like, lots of things reference horror movies that aren't supposed to be, like, parody horror. So it's, like, for me, when we do some of these movies, I'm like, oh, that's what that, like, joke is in that episode of Simpsons. Now I have a reference for it. Like, I knew it was Nightmare on Elm Street. I didn't know, like, what that all meant. So, like, I like when we do, like, those kinds of movies because, like, there are things that come up in other work.
Exactly.
And it's like, finally have context.
Now, Allison, I gotta say, The Exorcist, one of the most terrifying movies of all time. Haley, it's a very difficult movie that no words can give it justice. Okay.
Absolutely not. And we actually did the re-released version with like the extra scenes, which I saw in theaters as a kid. And I remember seeing that. That was one of my formative experiences of seeing. It was like slightly longer with some of the unedited scenes. And then I remember that night, and for whatever reason, my entire family, we happened to be out, and I came home to a darkened house. And I was like, I can't go inside. She's in there. I don't know what to do about it. But you're right. I mean, that's true. Like, I'm trying to convey a story to the best of my ability. But there's certain visuals, there's the atmosphere I can't convey. No. And I'm only giving, and that's why I kind of feel like, even if you were to listen to them, it's not really spoiled. You know what I mean? Like, you could still enjoy the Titanic, even though you know the ship goes down.
Exactly.
You know, like even if you heard The Exorcist, there's still so much more there. That I think is also what makes the podcast fun for people who have seen the movies. It's like, oh, I'm enjoying the retelling of it as a story, but I still have the other experience of the film itself.
Exactly.
Allison, I can't imagine what would have to happen for you to actually sit through the entire Exorcist. Like, we paid $1 million? I don't even know.
I mean, I think $1 million. I mean, that'll do it. But, like... Okay.
Now, do you know, Allison, that Linda Blair physically got sick when she saw the final product?
Did she really?
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah, it bothered her. It bothered her that bad. Now, Haley, you mentioned about the extra scenes in the Exorcist. One of those scenes that was cut out from the original movie is when Linda Blair is doing that inverted spider walk, coming down the stairs.
I remember. Yes, absolutely.
Now, that's
horrifying.
And it's amazing that they cut that out, because that has sort of become like the staple of maneuvers in demonic possession movies.
Yes, you're right. The idea of the creepy, like the spidery walk, the inverted walk. Now, according to something I read, allegedly the reason that was cut out is because when they filmed it, they weren't able to then sort of retroactively take out, like, I guess the stunt woman was suspended, or there was something attached to her. So when they couldn't clean it up, so it would look like someone was a stunt woman. So it wasn't until later they could sort of CGI that out, or it's some other way take that out. Allegedly, that's what I heard. Then they put it back in because they're like, it's 2000, we could actually make this look compelling.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It is funny how much of a demonic possession is all about being sort of an acrobat, so being a very bendy person.
So what do you think about the evolution of horror, going back from all the rage in the late 70s, 80s were the slasher flicks. Michael Myers, who's still going strong today. Jason sort of faded. Freddy sort of faded, but they're still huge, and they will always be a part of horror history. What do you think about the evolution of horror with found footage, with the Blair Witch Project, going into Paranormal Activity, and everybody trying to come up with something new to break the stereotypes that have been overdone in the past? As of today, how do you feel the horror industry is in reinventing itself and still staying scary?
This is just my opinion. I think horror is always better when you have like a director and a writer who is bringing a product that they fully conceived. For example, Get Out. Like I didn't think that was the scariest movie, but I thought it was like compellingly written. It was like its own singular idea. And I think unfortunately a lot of studio horror now is sort of like somebody, not a writer or director, trying to retroactively being like, okay, people like demons, let's try to go from here, rather than pick from the thousands, I'm sure, of excellent scripts that studios see a year. They're like, let's try to sort of, it's the same as like everything on streaming. It's sort of like, let's use the algorithm to pick for us, rather than let's let a pure weirdo or a team of weirdos make something very unique. And I don't want to trash talk any movie, but I will right now, because I saw The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, and I didn't think it was a bad film. No. But I do think where they're like, well, we already have these characters we established, and we could do something with it. And, is it going to be this compelling work of art? No, but we already own the IP, and I still enjoyed it. But there was that moment of like, okay, well, someone in a room decided this was going to be a movie, rather than someone's like, I have an artistic vision of something weird and upsetting that I want to see come to fruition. And again, it's not even like it was such a bad movie. I was just sort of watching it. It's like, this could have been a great movie if they had let somebody with a vision, like, do something stranger with it. But, obviously, I've never made a horror movie. That's not a judgment on any horror creator of any kind. But yeah, you just always hope that there is the next thing. Like, who is doing a weirder thing? Who is bringing that weirdness that I think horror needs? So it's not just reboots. Which again, I see every reboot, I still enjoy it. But like, what is the thing that we're not having because studios are afraid to do something a little stranger?
Exactly.
I don't know. I would like to see it.
Yeah,
like that Monique,
I
would love to see it.
I love filmmakers who take risks, and it may fall flat on its face, or it might be a huge success. But those who take the risks, I can appreciate that. Now, Alison, when you guys are working on what your next podcast is going to be, is it a collaboration between you and Haley as to which movie you're going to talk about? Or is Haley saying, okay, we're going to talk about this, and you can either say yay or nay to that?
I mean, I do a lot of, deferring to Halle just to be like, you tell me. Like, I don't know the genre. I know the big names and the hits, and like there's movies that I definitely like request, and I'm like, oh, I really do want to know what happens in this. And our listeners write in tons of recommendations of things that they either, they love, or they're like, I'm way too scared to see this movie. Can you guys just do this so that I can listen to it and I don't have to ever watch it because I'm so curious. So like, it's kind of a group effort. And then like Halle's expertise, of course, is like where I'm like, oh, we've done movies that I've never heard of, and now I'm terrified by.
Which would you say, Alison, was the movie that Halle described that just freaked you out the most?
I mean, The Babadook has stuck with me. It definitely has. But we've done some other. There was a Netflix movie we did, The Wretched.
Yes.
Was that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, The Wretched, great.
But, like, I had not heard one thing. I'm so scared I can't even be on camera right now. I'm the scariest person on this live cast because I keep disappearing. But like, I had never heard anything about that movie. I had not seen a trailer. I had not seen a poster. And then I watched the trailer for the podcast, and we did the podcast, and we did it at a time of day where it was evening, and it was the winter. So like it got dark while we were doing the podcast, and we finished, and I was like, I gotta like watch Seinfeld or something right now. Like I need to cleanse my brain of the absolute abject horror that was just because I also think like the movies where like and there's another movie that we've done that we haven't released yet, but The Invitation also
Oh,
really
that was such a great movie.
Yeah.
and I think about it all the time.
Yeah, talk about psychological, something that will mess you up. The Invitation was a great, great movie, and it was just one of those surpriser hits because it was a
Yeah.
kind of a unique story when it came out. And you know what, Allison, I'm willing to bet that a lot of the movies that Haley describes to you, when it goes through your imagination, I think I'm willing to bet at least some of them, if you actually watch them, do you ever ask yourself, they might not be as scary as Haley's describing them?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like it's why books can be so much scarier than movies.
Yeah.
Like your imagination can be way more terrifying than what a studio produces sometimes.
Yeah.
But I don't there's movies that we've done where I'm like, oh, I probably could have seen that because like they're kind of like the sillier and like the more kind of like fun ones where it's like this is horror, but this is also kind of like fun and not like filled with dread.
Yeah.
So like there's ones we've done that I'm like, oh, I could see that. But
Yeah,
boy,
like a Jennifer's Body or something.
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
a horror comedy.
Yeah.
You know,
Jennifer's
I think you would
Body or
like
like-
that.
like Ready or Not or what those like
Yeah.
How about
Those
Shaun
kind-
of the Dead? Would Allison enjoy Shaun of the Dead?
You know, I think she would because it is a horror comedy. But I'll tell you, she really does not like any kind of gore, anything to do with the body falling apart.
yeah.
Any kind of blood. So I in my mind, yes, of course, but also my mind has been worked by years of horror watching.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, yes, of course you watch this. And then I feel like the second you saw like a zombie limb or something, you'd be like, why
Yeah.
do this? Is still gross, you know?
Yeah.
So I can imagine. Haley, I don't know if you watched The Walking Dead, but if Allison was to watch the part where Negan basically abolishes two human beings' skulls into mashed potatoes, that would really disturb her.
I feel well. You're definitely right. I feel like we should do like a charity. It's like for charity, where like we watch something and we see how far Allison could get into
Yeah.
it, and people could like sort of donate money. And the farther she gets into it, the more money we could donate. That might be fun. Oh boy, it's gonna have to be something like that though. It's gonna be something real gnarly.
I know.
Yeah.
It'd be for a good cause, and as long as she can keep her eyes
Yeah.
open and keep it, keep watching it, it's all
Yeah,
going
it's
to
really
a good
fun.
cause. So Haley,
Yeah, I really like that.
what I know doing this show keeps me really busy, and I'm sure it's pretty much the same for you. So, what would you say? What is the last like horror movie that you saw?
Oh, I wrote this down because I assumed you would ask me this, and it's the movie Censor,
Okay.
which as I saw on streaming, and I think I watched it on Shudder. I only look up the name of the director because I wanted to say who it was. I liked it. What was it? Oh, it's Prano Bailey Bond, and the name of the movie is Censor. And it's about like a woman who works as a video, like a movie censor, and
Oh, that's right.
Also, a good example.
No, I didn't mean to
and I
interrupt,
wanna
but I
say-
read a review about that, but I haven't watched it
Okay.
yet. I'm curious about it.
Yeah, and I think it's what's sort of they're playing with in the movie is sort of like if you are watching these movies as your job all the time, what are the effects on you? Will the lines of reality becoming blurred? And I like that. I thought that was an interesting way to approach it because I guess in the UK they sort of have this, in a way that we have the Satanic Panic or sort of fears about different, like 80s hair metal or whatever. They had video nasties, which is like the idea that movies were sort of corrupting people and causing them to commit violence. That, which was also a whole 90s thing here.
Yeah.
You never hear about that anymore. But it was all like, video games or movies are making people like be violent. I guess we have bigger problems. So they're kind of, people are like, whatever, it is what it is. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I want to say I watched it on Shudder. I could be wrong with that. But yeah, I think worth a watch.
I didn't know that was out because I read a review to our audience about that last week, and I didn't know it was out yet. Now that I know,
I think it probably just came out. Yeah, because I just watched it on Friday, so it might have just come out last week.
well, you may have just given me my movie pick for tonight. Now, Allison, okay, so Haley just said you don't like blood, guts, gore,
Yeah.
but you sort of hinted that you like Silence of the Lambs, the psychological, which for a lot of people it's reversed. They can take the blood, guts, and gore because they know that's fake. They know it's sausage.
Yeah.
Are you totally okay, or is there a limit with you when it comes to psychological thrillers?
I mean, what I like about a psychological thriller and like also what I like about horror is I feel like we've talked about this on the podcast. We're both comedy people. Like it is kind of like comedy. Like you're leading somebody somewhere and then you're changing directions and not tricking them, but there's a lot of the same tropes are used in comedy and in horror and stuff like that. So I feel like I just really respond to that as like a viewer and as a professional, I think. Like I'm just like interested, like how did you get everybody to think it was this? And then it's like, a mystery. I like kind of like trying to put a puzzle together of like what's happening. So like when a movie is just like, oh, this maniac keeps stabbing people and there's not really a why.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. Why would I watch that? But when it's like, who is killing these people? That's like more interesting to me. So like, I definitely like, where the line blurs for psychological thrillers and horror, I can't exactly figure out where that is. It's like a trial and error, what gives me nightmares and what did I like kind of thing. But there is definitely a line where I'm like, well, now we've dipped into psychological horror, and that's absolutely not.
Exactly.
Like, that's not for me, but like the thing, the psychological thriller. And I even think like The Shining lives a little bit more in that world than it does in horror.
Yeah. Where does Hannibal Lecter fit in there for you?
I mean, I think, and I've seen, Silence of the Lambs, and then also, I know I saw at some point, and I read all of the books, Hannibal or Red Dragon, or whatever, like the prequel and the sequel or whatever they are.
Red Dragon came before,
Yeah, those both felt more violent. I feel like Silence of the Lambs, like it's violent. It's about a man who murders women and wears a suit and then consulting a cannibal. So like I know there's violence, but I think the movie adaptations of those two books on either side of it were just gorier. Yeah. And just not as like classically good as Silence of the Lambs is.
You bring up a great point with the whole Silence of the Lambs. Haley, have you been watching Clarice on CBS, or have you not?
I'll be honest, I watched the pilot and I was like, I'll try to watch some more, and I just haven't. So, have you been watching it?
Oh, yeah. I love it.
Great. Okay.
I mean, it is a pickup. It takes place a year after the movie Silence of the Lambs with Jodie Foster. They did some great casting with Clarice and Rebecca Breeds. It's really, it's an amazing show. Unfortunately, because of Hollywood rights issues, we don't know if there's going to be a season 2, but that's a whole other matter. But it's not gory. It's not even as psychologically scary as Silence of the Lambs. So, Allison, if you want to just dip your toe into a little bit of TV that I think would definitely, be in that your side of the fence, I would recommend Clarice on CBS.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, I do love the movie, so I feel like a good chance that I'll like the show.
Exactly. So, Haley, you said sci-fi is like what you love in horror. Going back to, a little kid, what is the first movie that you remember watching? You talked about books and how that got you into it. But do you have like an image seared in your brain of the first horror movie you watched? What is it?
Absolutely. Well, I can't say if it was the first one, but it's just the first one that I can remember. I remember being at my friend Whitney's I guess we were in 5th grade, so 11th birthday party. And, we're all 11. And I guess maybe her parents were like, whatever, they're old enough. And I remember we watched The Poltergeist,
Oh,
another favorite of mine. And I was terrified, and I kind of like fell asleep during the movie while everyone else was still awake. And when I woke up to the scene of the cameraman who was accompanying sort of the paranormal investigator tearing off his own face in the bathroom mirror. And I remember waking up and being like, I shouldn't be watching this. It's funny because the next day, like, we were all freaked out. And the next day, my friend was like, Mom, why did you let us watch this? And she's like, oh, it was so over the top. I thought you knew it wasn't real. And I was like, I knew it wasn't real, but it still was scared me so badly. And here we are, So I guess in some ways I should, write her mom an email and say thank you to give me a lifelong interest. But yes, I will always remember waking up and just seeing horrifying. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, on your guys' podcast, which again is called Ruined, I know you guys take letters. At least you start off the show by reading questions and so on.
Yeah.
How important is it for you guys to bring in that viewer interaction?
Very. I think I wouldn't consider myself a member of the horror community, though maybe now I am, but I know that it's a genre that's fandom is very devout and rabid in a very good way, that people really have a lot of opinion in the way that I don't think other film genres have such a central such a fan base and such a knowledgeable things like that. So I feel for me, I think it's great because I'm of course these people who love horror are chiming in with interesting questions or extra info that we didn't know, and that's just very fun. So I think it's important. I think we both really like that.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, me too. And when I do my solo shows where I don't have any guests, I totally just bring in the audience with me. We go over the headlines. I will share my opinion. I love to hear their opinion. It's fun. That's why I choose to do this show live. It's because it's a lot more fun when you have people responding to you. So, you know what? I'm going to try to ruin a movie for both of you. Now, Haley, okay. I'm going to assume you have not watched this. It's a 2014 movie called Inner Demons. Have you watched it?
No, I don't think I have.
Great.
No, I haven't sound
Great.
familiar.
So, Allison, listen to this, okay? I saw this movie years ago, and I rewatched it again, and the star of the movie is going to be my guest here July 9th.
Oh, great.
So
that's exciting.
It's a basic demonic possession movie, but here's the kicker. The way it's shot, it's in... You guys know that that show Intervention where people film somebody who's trying to get clean? It's a footage film with that kind of background. You have a film crew that is they tricked a person who's going to be intervened on, thinking that they're doing a documentary about them, but it's really an intervention. But we find out that this girl is actually using drugs because it's the only way to keep the demon inside her at bay. I love that movie because it's a really interesting concept. Now, please, guys, I'm not out there endorsing anybody who thinks they're demonically possessed to go out and do heroin. I'm not doing that. But just the concept of this girl who years earlier, she was with a group of people, high school or middle school friends, and they played a joke on her. They brought her into a room, and they had her do this ritual, and she started going into a seizure, and they freaked out, and they left her alone. Right there on the floor, having a seizure. And at that point, she got possessed by a demon. So the way, as the years progressed, and this demon was oppressing her, was she turned to drugs, and she found that by using drugs, it kept the demon at bay. So when the intervention crew arrives and they do the intervention, and of course she's hesitant at first, but she agrees to go to intervention, and lo and behold, when she's detoxing at the rehab facility and the drugs are wearing off, guess who rears their ugly head? Well, the demon himself. and it's a great movie. And the reason I bring this movie up because it's storytelling, and I like unique storytelling that just doesn't follow a predetermined set of tropes and cliches that we've seen over and over in horror movies. And I'm all about the story. I'm all about the writers. You know, the writers are what make a movie or a TV show. So when I see an interesting story that's unique and the concept of this, of wow, this girl has come up with a way to keep the demon, literally the demon inside her at bay through drugs is phenomenal. And to spoil the ending for you guys, this is where I ruin it. One of the cameramen actually becomes really close to her. And he starts to believe her after what he sees, that this girl is being plagued by a demon. So while she's in rehab, and she's just completely losing it, this demon is possessing her. He gives her drugs, and it sort of brings her out of it. But the rehab center finds out that she started using drugs. She gets kicked out, and she, her parents lock her up so she won't get drugs inside the house. The guy that's been falling in love with her does an exorcism. But here's where I'm going to ruin it for you guys. The dad, who is a drunk himself, decides to do a murder-suicide, family annihilator. He kills his daughter, his wife, and then shoots himself. And here's this poor guy who was doing an exorcism just by what he read off the internet or whatnot, and was successful. And in the last minute, the father comes in, blows her brains out. Okay, so the possessed girl is dead. The father shoots himself. And the way they end it is the demon that was inside her takes over the camera guy. I mean, it's just messed up. Messed up.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I definitely want to see that movie now, even though you've ruined it. I love that. I mean, like, I love that, that's the central metaphor, of the inner demon. Man, I need to see that. That's incredible.
It's I believe it's on Shudder or Amazon or one. You'll find it. It's out there. It's called Inner Demons, and I'm always on the lookout. I don't know how you do it, Haley, but when I'm done working for the day and I sit down in the couch before I'm ready to bed, I have a little system of how I'm gonna pick a movie.
Okay.
Let me share you what my system is. I first go through whether it's Shudder or Amazon or Hulu, and I go through the horror section. I, of course, read the synopsis. Okay, that's step one. If I find a synopsis that interests me, step two is I go to IMDb. And I have a minimum rating on IMDb to proceed to step three. It has to be at least a 5 or above.
Okay.
So if the synopsis grabs me and it has a good, pretty decent viewer score, then I will proceed to actually watching the movie. So with time being precious, how do you, with the just overwhelming content that we have available to us nowadays, with all these different streaming services, and you sit down at the end of the day and you just want to relax and watch a horror movie, how do you decide? How do you pick what you're going to watch?
This is a very hard question that I haven't been able to really fully answer. I read a website called Culture Crypt.
Okay.
And I only know it because this person, I don't know anything about them, is that they review, virtually every horror movie. And I trust their opinion. And then other than that, if I'm on Shudder or Amazon Prime or whatever, I'm definitely reading their ratings and the reviews. Not that I'm saying, if it got bad reviews, I'm not going to watch it. I watch things with terrible reviews and I have a great time because what I want in a horror movie is not necessarily it's a great film. Like sometimes I want to watch this is goofy or this is bad. That's fine with me. This is bad acting. I don't care about that. But it is so hard because, also in my household, I feel like my boyfriend, like we watch pretty much everything together, so it's like, oh, is he in the mood for horror? If not, we're gonna watch The Critic, available on Crackle, in case anyone was about to watch The Critic with John Lovitz. But other than that, like for example, like Censor, I watched that alone, and I was like going through Shudder, going through Amazon Prime, like, oh, I've read about this, I've heard about this, I'm just gonna roll the dice on this. But yeah, it's an ongoing, an ongoing issue. I'll someone else. I'll watch a movie if I don't like it 15 minutes in, I'll stop.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you.
I will do it.
Yeah, I'm with you too.
But yeah, I'd love to know I like the idea of having a process, and I'd love to know other people's process. How do they feel like they found their way to do it? I don't know.
Have you seen Terrifier with the creepy clown?
Absolutely, yes.
Have you told Allison about that one?
No, that's a good one. We should do that.
Allison, Terrifier has one of the best way to describe it is nastiest kill scenes I have ever seen in horror. And you know what I'm talking about. The inverted girl, Haley, who gets split down the middle with a hacksaw. So, Allison, if you let your imagination run wild, picture a pretty much naked woman tied upside down, and she split in half, literally, with a hacksaw.
Ugh.
Doesn't that make you want to turn to horror right then and there?
Picturing it.
Yeah. So Allison, I mean, after you guys do a review, does the imagery linger with you for a while?
Yeah, and I think because the way we structure the podcast, I watch the trailer and then hear Halle explain it to me all the way through, that it does feel like it possibly is almost scarier than seeing the movie, because in many of the movies there is an ending that feels like relief.
Yeah.
And I don't get that. I mean, I get Halle telling me that, but the trailer is still kind of how I experience the vibe and the visuals. Yeah. So those really do stick with me. And there's some really terrifying trailers out there.
Yeah. I always say, you got to be careful with trailers, because it could be an absolutely horrible movie, but they can put an absolutely amazing trailer together.
Oh yeah, it's an art form.
So let's step away a little bit from horror. Allison, what would you say is your genre? Comedy, romantic comedy, drama?
I like comedies. They don't really make many anymore. But I mean, a big studio comedy, nothing's really ever as fun as one of those. Wayne's World is the best movie I've ever seen. So I love that. I think the thing about me that is that I actually am not a huge movie person.
Okay.
I am I like TV more than I like movies. So sometimes I'll go a year and I'm I saw 4 movies this year. Whereas I've watched everything that's come out on television. So
let's go to Miss Maisel. I love that show. I mean, I'm not just a horror person. I love that show. I think it's hysterical. It has great acting. It has great writing. I know you've written for this show. If you can sort of separate yourself from that, do you find that show funny? Do you know exactly why it's such a success?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes it such a success is all of the elements that combine to the visuals of that show. I mean, we talk about horror and how important visuals are, and it's true for Maisel too. I think it goes down really smooth. It's beautiful. The costumes are really good. The music is really good. The banter, the acting and the clip of the dialogue is very. I think it all more than any one thing, it's very funny or it's very cool. It's just that it kind of all combines to make a very special finished. It feels like a very collaborative show where I do feel every element of the production is considered important.
Exactly. And I believe it wrapped up its second season a while ago, and I do hope there's going to be a season 3.
There is a season 3. It's already out. We just finished shooting 4 this month.
Okay, so 3 is done. 4 is going to be coming out hopefully soon.
4 will come out this year, hopefully.
Awesome. And you're still writing for the show?
Yeah, well, we just finished the season, so now I'm
Okay,
free. But
okay. That is so cool. I think
So if anyone's hiring,
yeah, so if anybody out there runs a television show, please call me.
so. You guys are coming up on your 1 year anniversary for Ruin. Congratulations, by the way.
thank you.
Uh, how do you see it moving forward? Because we know shows are always constantly evolving. You
hmm
got to keep evolving, or else if you grow stagnant, it's going to get old. How do you see Ruin moving forward?
Well, I think we're sort of taking a page out of your playbook, and we are planning to do a live show. We haven't picked the date, but definitely before the end of summer. I feel like a live show is like the natural. I mean, like I watch podcasts live on YouTube all
Yeah.
the time. I feel like people love, if you're listening to us, you probably enjoy watching us as well. We got to make a drinking game.
Yeah.
We want to involve, sort of the chat function like you have. And I think that's definitely the nearest goal of ours is to do that within the next month or two. And I think that's, other than that, I mean, listen.
Find a way to. I mean,
Exactly.
there's horror TV shows that I think
Mhm.
are such a good fit for what we do that like I think we're gonna try and maybe figure out a way to incorporate horror TV into what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And just finding like new things. Like, I mean, I already love the pitch of like raising money by seeing how many minutes I can last into a horror movie. Like things that kind of are like fun one-off adjacent.
Yeah.
Great, but like the beauty of the podcast is there's so many horror movies that like I don't feel like we're ever gonna have to pivot. Like I think
Exactly.
there's just
Yeah.
the world is so open to us, and there's so many movies that people request and that keep coming out and so I think that like there's
And especially now
going.
with television, it
Mhm.
used to be to really see the scary stuff, you'd have to go to the movies. Now, television, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, has surpassed films when it comes to whether it's psychological horror or blood, guts, and gore. Do you agree, Haley?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking about like Hannibal, the show. I mean, there's no way Allison watched that. I mean, visually stunning,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly gory, very psychologically traumatizing. As much if not more so, and in a span or a scope that you just wouldn't have been able to do if it was a movie. So
Exactly.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, yeah, we're never gonna not see horror movies in the theater, but TV, especially on streaming, hopefully will continue to open up more and more opportunities for horror creators.
Exactly.
And my thing is, I'm already watching them, so we might as well do them for the podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do what you love. And if you guys love it, I think it's awesome. I think you guys have a great idea. I'm going to be listening to a lot more of your shows. So right now, is it on? You guys do a show once a week?
Our podcast, the episodes come out on Tuesday, and we've been doing sort of like one-off. We've been doing it once a month. We're hoping to do it more. We have guests sort of discuss a specific movie, and that sort of will just sprinkle through the month. But yeah, at least every Tuesday, if you sign up for us, wherever you listen to your podcast, you will get an episode of Ruined.
That's
Please listen.
awesome.
I feel like your fans will, your
Yeah,
listeners,
Absolutely.
your viewers will enjoy it.
I've
Perfect
listened to
night.
it and I recommend it to you guys. It's funny. Just like Hallie said, whatever is your podcast platform of choice, go look it up. It's called Ruined. It really is funny. It's informative. We are out of time. Can you guys believe that hour flew by already?
Fast.
I can only believe it because like the temperature in my apartment has increased every minute.
Because
I'm like,
I could get better audio.
same, yeah. Well, thank you so much for having us. This was
No,
so fun.
thank you for being here, Allison, Haley. It's been an absolute treat and honor to talk to you guys. I appreciate what you guys do with your podcast. I think it's awesome. Keep it up. I wish you guys nothing but the best, and I see
Thank you.
no
You too.
no reason for your show to continue taking off. And you guys are
Listen.
great.
Your lips to God's ears.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to thank our audience for tuning in. Again, the name of the podcast is called Ruined. I definitely, urge you guys to check it out. You won't be disappointed. Allison, Haley, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, I'll be back on the air again tomorrow night. Till tomorrow, stay safe. And on behalf of Halle and Allison, stay walking. Good night.